All right, welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming. I'm Garrett Santner, I'm the pastor here at Lynnwood, and it's a joy and a treat to host this evening's just discussion and film and conversation, and just a few items of housekeeping. There is popcorn and water if you haven't gotten them already but are interested in that. And then also there are restrooms just out these main doors and back into the left. So if anybody needs those, there's both women's, men's, and also handicap. And so I think that's all that I wanted to mention. So I will turn it over to Matthew.
Thank you. I'm Matthew Van Mustricht. I'm the pastor at the Altamont and Helderberg Reformed Churches. When we were talking about this, I asked Kyle and Garrett if I could talk a little bit to kind of, at the beginning, to kind of frame it. It's always dangerous when you have a preacher, give a preacher a microphone. It's equally as dangerous when you give a professor a microphone. I'm both of those in one, so I'm sorry. This won't be too long, but I have a PowerPoint presentation with some slides because we're going to learn some things before we start. So, because I think the way in which we use words is important, especially when it comes to something like this. The Jewish rabbi and scholar Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote that words create worlds. And so the words that we use are really important to the worlds in which we create, in which we inhabit. And so to that end, I think just a little bit of thinking about some of the words that we use. So there are a number of words that are swirling around us: ethnicity, nation, nationality, citizenship, religion. Those are all related and distinct. And I think understanding a little bit of their relatedness and their distinctiveness is important. So in world history, the nation state that we understand is actually new kid on the block. There was no Italy until 1861. There was no German nation state until 1871. The Austro-Hungarian Empire dissolved in 1918, and the Ottoman Empire dissolved in 1922. So when it comes to what we understand to be nation states is relatively new, and what we'll see here in the documentary that we're going to be watching is right at the end of empires and the beginning of nation states. And so it's important, I think, to be able to frame this. So what's ethnicity? Ethnicity comes from the Greek word ethnos, and it's a people with a shared language, cultural heritage, and ancestry. A nation comes from the Latin word natio, which is the same word as natal, means to be born, but it's a historically constituted, stable community of people formed based upon a common language, territory, economic life, ethnicity, and or psychological makeup manifested in a common culture. So here you can have multiple nations made up of a similar ethnicity. A nationality is about membership in a particular nation or state. And then a citizen is a legally recognized member of a state with associated rights and obligations. State, then, is distinct from nation. And I think this is an important thing because usually we think about the two as the same. But nation is a people group, kind of a relatively, with things that hold them together. A state is a legally organized entity that has citizens. And the religion is a personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices. So in antiquity, Judaism was an ethno-religious population, ethnicity and religion, with an emphasis on the religion, because it was still possible to convert, even in the ancient world, to become Jewish, even if you weren't born Jewish. So it's ethno-religious, but not exclusively so. As with some others. In modernity, however, Judaism is both an ethnicity and a religion. So not all ethnic Jews are religious Jews, and not all religious Jews are ethnic Jews. And so this is, I think, important to frame. When we talk about Jews, we need to understand what exactly is it? Is it ethnicity? Is it religion? Is it both? Because this is a situation which a similar term kind of identifies different groups of people. Case in point, I have a friend who is an avowed atheist, but identifies as Jewish. not religious at all, but she's ethnically Jewish, and so she's an ethnic Jew, but not a religious one. Arab is an ethnicity. So Arab and Islam are not the same thing, although they're often linked. Islam finds its origin around the year 610. So that is kind of after Christianity. So before Islam, Arabs followed indigenous polytheistic religions as well as Judaism and Christianity. There remain Arabic Jews and Christians. Arab then is only an ethnicity and not a religion. So here we have a little chart about some of the things. So ethnicity, we have Arab and Jew. Nationality, we have Palestinian and Israeli. Citizenship or state, we have Israeli. And religion, we have Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. All of these are in play in our discussion. So Palestinians then are people who are native to Palestine, which is that area in the Levant that is currently Israel-Palestine. So Palestinians are people who are native to that. They are a nation without a state, so they're a stateless nation. So they're a common people group that have commonalities, that there's an identity there, but they don't have a state. Israel is a Jewish state, but not all Israelis are Jews. There is a minority of Palestinian Israelis. How that came to be is another story, and we will get into see that about a little bit next week as well. But by law, only Jews have a right to self-determination. So according to Israeli law, Israel is a Jewish state, and self-determination is only for the Jewish people. So let's kind of break up some of these equivocacies that we sometimes make. Jewish and Israeli are not the same. The state of Israel and Jews are not the same. Israelis in the Israeli government are not the same, because not all people support the actions of their government. Similarly, Palestinian does not necessarily mean Muslim, nor does Palestinian mean Hamas, nor is Gaza and the West Bank the same. So let's talk about what we are not doing tonight and next week. What we are not doing is we're not going to justify violence. We're not going to fan flames or tolerate anti-Semitism. We're not going to fan flames or tolerate anti-Arab prejudice or Islamophobia. And we're not going to offer justification for Hamas or violent tactics. Here's what we are doing. We're seeking to grow in a fuller understanding. We are seeking to grow in our compassion. We're seeking to discern our role as Christians. We're seeking to better see the complexity. And perhaps most importantly, we are here to learn what we don't know. Because often we don't know what we don't know. And the first step of learning is actually learning the things we don't know. And that's what we're hoping to do here. And so after the film, we're going to have a little time of discussion, and all of us have some level of understanding and knowledge about the realities in Israel-Palestine. None of us, however, are experts on this. You will get an expert next week when John Parlberg comes, but we are also seeking to understand this as well. And so any discussion that may happen as a result of this is all of us trying to grow in a fuller understanding. And so just some guidelines for dialogue. First, we don't want to assume, because we know what that makes out of you and me. Second of all, speak only for yourself, I statements. Speak with clarity, listen with sincerity. Be kind with one another in our speech. Seek clarification when needed. Be attentive and considerate of other points of views. And there are no winners and losers. If we all leave here having learned something and having grown in our compassion, then we are all winners. And so I think it's important that we're not a debate, that this is not going to be winners and losers out of this. All right. And I'd like to invite Pastor Kyle, who's going to share something as well.
So while Garrett is switching over the technology, I'm Kyle Delhagen. I'm the pastor at Hamilton Union Presbyterian Church. I'm really glad that we're doing this. Like Matthew said, we are all seeking to grow in our understanding. Part of that is, as I was sitting in our living room with my wife a few days ago talking about this, she said, we should read a book because reading is fun and it's what we do. She actually read a book called Blood Brothers, which is about a Palestinian Christian working for peace in the area. She read this in preparation for her trip to Israel last January. And it is an excellent book that talks about the relationships between peoples in that area. So we are going to be offering, because this is just the beginning, there is a lot more for us to unpack and understand, more than we can do in 1 week or 2 weeks. So if you are interested, we are from the Presbyterian Church, but you don't have to be from the Presbyterian Church to join us. She's got a sign-up sheet in the back. We don't know what day or time this is going to be yet. We are simply gauging interest and trying to figure out what people's availability is so that we can determine what will work best for the most amount of people. If you have any questions about that, she's in the back. She's waving her hands, and the sign-up is in the back. She also did print out the foreword to the book. If you're curious about what it feels like and sounds like, to get to know it. And I think that it's going to be another really important way that we continue to work through and consider these really important issues. That's the end of my commercial. I think we're ready.
So one of the things that I appreciate about this particular film is how it shows all of the little things that all contribute, little piece by piece by piece, all over the world into something bigger. And that's much of what we see in history is a series of little things which they don't seem like a big thing at the time, but at the end of it all, looking back, they become very, very big things. I'm wondering, just to I'm kind of wondering, is there something that you learned, something that surprised you? I'm kind of wondering your general reactions, responses. What did that rise up, bring up in you?
Also, I have a microphone that you might want to use just so people can hear.
I learned all the things I don't know.
Yeah? Others?
I didn't know that there were so many people living together in harmony at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's changed where they couldn't live together. That was it.
Yeah. I don't know about any of you, but when I was a kid, the message that I kind of got was that this has been going on for millennia, and that and so there's nothing that can really be done about it because it's been going on since the beginning of time and will continue to the end of time. But what we see here is that no, it hasn't been going for millennia. It's really a 20th century thing. That before that there was relative getting along as much as can be with different people groups.
I didn't know that the first conflict, the losses on both sides were exactly equal. One animal and one person.
I didn't know that there was such a big influx of immigrants from Russia all at that one time.
Yeah.
So I want to pick up on a couple of threads there, and I've got a couple of notes. A few years ago, my wife, who is always teaching me, taught me a valuable lesson about trauma. And I think one of the things that isn't mentioned, but it's implicit, is the trauma of generations. Elena taught me that before your mother was born, your mother, grandmother, and the earliest trace of you were all in the same body. What your experience affected your DNA. And many studies teach us that if a mother experiences chronic stress in her pregnancy, the child will have a higher risk of being born premature, be hyperactive, irritable, and colicky. So think about this. What our grandmothers felt literally impacted. Scientists have found that trauma may be traced back up to 14 generations. 14 generations. So what struck me is as those Ashkenazi Jews are fleeing persecution in Russia, they're fleeing persecution and trauma, and they're carrying that with them. And violence and trauma beget violence, and trauma beget violence and trauma. And it is this vicious cycle that we just seem so locked into. And some days I just don't know what to do with that. Some days I just hold that and say, God?
Thank you.
One thing near the beginning was the Jews of Palestine, I think it was Sephardic. They were acquiescing to limitations that the Ottoman Empire put on them. They were second-class citizens. And the ones who were coming then from Europe didn't go that way. And that's one of the things. They got along because they were like 5% of the population at the time, which over the decades into the mid-30s became 30% of the population. And that was a large part of the influx that happened. But that is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that change. And it was unfortunate. I hadn't known when those Russian Jewish guards came in, and they were so antagonistic and so unwilling to get along. That obviously is one of the flashpoints which possibly could have changed if World War I hadn't occurred. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
And it makes sense too. I mean, with that, what Pastor Kyle had mentioned is the coming from the persecution they faced, and so you carry that with you, and so you want to make sure that you don't have that again, and so trauma begets violence, which begets trauma. That's a great example of that.
And that's what Zionists want.
Nope. Yep.
Nobody wants us. In fact, they're actively persecuted.
Yep.
On a personal note, a friend of mine I've known a lot of years, him and his wife, and I asked him one day, I said, "What's your wife's nationality?" And he said to me, "She's Jewish." Well, I stopped and I said to myself, I didn't ask what her religion was. He said, I didn't ask him that question. I asked him again, what's her nationality? She's Jewish. This film explained the difference. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that. I didn't feel that. A very interesting thought process. Because as I said, there are Jews who are not Jewish. There are Jewish who are not Jews. And that was, I guess that's right. Therefore, the nationality part of it the nationality part of it is not the religious part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's two separate. Sometimes they're together, and sometimes they're not.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for non-Jewish people to get that, but I got it. Very interesting historically.
Yeah. Others. What are questions that you have? Not that that any of us can answer all those, but I think bringing the questions up to our minds can be helpful in seeking to understand as well.
So this whole area is Palestine, and Israel is just a part of Palestine, or that's what I don't get.
Yeah, so for a long time it was known as with different names. So that area has always been a crossroads between people going up towards Syria and going down toward North Africa, Egypt. So it's always been a crossroads. It's always been where people have met. So it's had different names. So, most recently before that in the film, it was Ottoman. And so it was part of the Ottoman Empire. And so it really became the label Palestine was kind of an informal use. That term, that identity marker has a long history, and it's not all a straight line. But it really became into major use during the British period that this didn't get to. So after the Ottoman Empire collapses, the British take over, and just like most problems with the world, the British made things worse. And that was where kind of the official label of Palestine became. That was kind of a British protectorate. And then what happened between this film and today, of course, is another source of huge trauma for Jews. And then the partition. So the United Nations suggested a partition. So the British wanted it because there was all kinds of it was causing problems. The British were trying to manage this, and they tried to slow down Jewish immigration. And then the British found their buildings blown up and things like that. So it was a really difficult time. So they're like, here, the Jews can get a state, the Arabs can get a state, and we can get out of here. And that was the partition. So the whole area right now is sort of Israel, sort of not. It's not really another country, but it's territories. And so next week's film we'll talk more in depth about some more of the current reality, what happened after this. So that's a very not good answer to your question, but.
It's not direct, but maybe indirect. We, as people most of us have been born in this country. What are we known? What is this country known as? United States of America. So this area that we live in is America. And not everybody lives in America, but not everybody lives in the United States, but they are part of the Americas.
Yeah.
That's not a direct connection, but I get your point.
Mm-hmm. Others, yes. A time in the British? After World War I let's say 1922 to 1948? Circa both of those? Yeah.
How long did the Ottoman Empire last? How did they get control over Israel? And why were there so few Jews living there?
Yeah, so Ottoman Empire lasted a long time, several centuries. And so how do they get control? They did what all empires do. Empires exist solely to expand. That's the difference between the modern nation state, is we don't understand that modern nation states exist to expand, but empires did. So they expanded, and that's how that area was part of the Roman Empire before that. And so then it was also part of the Byzantine Empire, and then it became the Ottoman Empire. And how there were so few Jews is that there was a little thing called Christianity kind of began, and then that kind of swept through. And so you have a lot of people kind of converting to Christianity. You have a lot of people movements, just like, migration is a very human, very historic thing. And so I don't know I don't have a specific answer for that, but yeah, I think it was the Christian population, the Muslim population, because the Ottoman Empire was officially Muslim, and I think that there had been two different religions that had swept through that region, Christianity and Islam, between that. 1299. Okay, thank you. So 1299 to 22 was the lifespan of the Ottoman Empire. Thank you. Thanks, Google. Yeah.
Maybe this is next week's topic, but what is Hamas? Help me understand that.
Yes.
Really, I don't get it.
Yes. So that will be a bit of next week. So what today was to kind of give some background to the partition, and to try to have some understanding. The big thing was just that this conflict is not like millennia old, and to kind of get some of the seeds, and then next week we'll get into some of the current reality. Mostly the film next week mostly is about the West Bank. But John Parlberg, who will be here, will talk a little bit about Gaza as well, and there's where we get Hamas. But I think where it comes from largely is trauma leads to violence, which leads to trauma, which leads to violence, and violence tends to beget more violence, and when it continues, when that ball keeps rolling without stopping, that's what happens.
I also just wanted to say that when talking about the Bedouins being moved and the land being bought out from underneath them, reminded me a lot of what happened to indigenous people here in this country, and the mistreatment of them as well.
Yes, indeed, exactly.
That comment just reminded me that we have worldview collision going on here as well. How do you value the land? Can you actually buy it? My land is, what was a comment at the beginning? My land is my value, something like that. And if you think you kind of own it because you've been there forever, but you don't actually own it, that's a problem when somebody comes in and buys it, because their worldview is, if I buy it, it's mine, and then I can do what I want. Mm-hmm. And so you definitely have these worldview collisions, and it's not just a misunderstanding of people, it's a deeper misunderstanding of how you actually look at and value the world. And that's also a major problem, you know, from tribalism, if you will, which is another whole issue, to the modern state and nation idea, and which I'm sure it's going to go into a little bit on the next one. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I have a question about the Jewish people left Russia. So even though this is a conflict in Israel and Palestine now. Aren't there centuries of time where the Jewish haven't felt like there's no place where they belong, and so they keep immigrating places? So there's always a conflict about where they're going, and so they feel like there's just no place that they belong. And so even though you said this has started in the early 1900s, it really has been going on for forever.
Yeah. You're exactly right. It started here between this particular population and this location in the early 1900s. But you're exactly right. The relationship between Jews and Christians even had been sour for a long time in various places.
You know, one of the things that the three of us, as we were talking about all of this, is we want to make really sure that we are not engaging in anything that might be anti-Semitism or anti-Arabic or Islamophobic, etc. Anti-Semitism goes back, I mean, how far back can you go? I mean, people have read the letters of Paul and read anti-Semitism in that. And in the film, you know, they said, you know, there are people without a home. They have been wanderers of sorts, and so that anti-Semitism, which is so evil, it just takes root seemingly wherever they go, and you see it throughout history. You see it in Paul, you see it in Shakespeare, and you see it all the way up to Nazi Germany and beyond. Got one back there. Thanks.
And just kind of to that point, you know, I was in Israel, Palestine, and you go to different places, and even the names that we have for those places can so quickly turn into anti-Semitic or Islamophobic, we'll say. For example, the West Bank, we all know it as the West Bank. To Palestinians, it's occupied territory. But there are many Jews who also say, this is the land of Judea and Samaria. This is the land of, in the Bible, this was our genetic connection. And so it's really hard, words create worlds, right? It's really hard to find the right verbiage, and it's just a reminder that our words really do have meaning. And as we're talking about all these things, to just be so careful, I don't know, to be so careful to create a space where both can exist, where there can be a both and not just an either or.
And it's possible. Look at that, in the film, The Coffee House, where there was a Muslim, a Jew, and a Christian. I mean, it sounds like a joke, but they are making music together. They're creating. I mean, this is the kingdom of God. And it is possible, and it was there. And then it wasn't.
One of the things I don't think we should overlook, and I don't think the film overlooked it, but we might have missed it. I might have missed it. I might have closed my eyes, which happens this time of day. Anyway, one of the things that I noticed was that the economics of that area made a very valid point in the success of the Jews who came into that area. They found that the collective made more money, made more progress than the individual farmer. Therefore, more product, more money, more ability to buy property. All right? So the economic should not be forgotten. And I go back to the United States. We had our own conquering heroes, if you will. One of the things that I did learn was one of the reasons that the native population did not grow as quickly as maybe the European population came to this as immigrants. They didn't invent the wheel. A simple thing like that. They didn't use the wheel. They didn't have the wheel. Therefore, their economics, because they didn't have the wheel, held them back in terms of product, in terms of moving the product, etc. Everything was slower. It was a different concept. And that held them back tremendously. In Europe, they invented the wheel. And that, all of a sudden, you've got economic, you could do other things that you never thought about doing. But I think that also happened in that part of the world.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the clash of worlds a bit as well, as you have Europeans coming with European worldviews and European expectations, and then you have Arabs who exist with Arabic worldviews and Arabic expectations about how the world works, and and you have a clash, and one of those, one of them often is gonna tends to take over. Yeah.
I actually wanted to pick up on something Kyle said about the coffee house where the Jew and the Muslim and the Christian get together. And there are still individual people and small groups in Israel now, today, working together for peace and to try to break down some of those barriers. So, that it still can happen, but it takes more than just a few to do that.
Yeah. You, Garrett.
So in the next section,
Yeah.
is there also time that will be set aside for understanding what's happening here in our country, and the tensions that are over there are spilling into this area? And how do we talk to our neighbors when there's such fear as to, like you said, what to say or how to say it, when you fully don't understand deeply the cultures or the what ties they may have or what hatred they may have. I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah. I think. Yeah. Right. And I think so. I think yes and no to your question. Yeah. I mean, we could very easily have an entire year where we go week by week and unpack this. So I think the biggest thing, the way that we can understand how it impacts us here and how to talk with others, is to try to better understand kind of the roots that they come from. So Palestinian people here, how are they experiencing, or how have their families experienced that reality? And similarly with Israelis, Jewish folks, Israeli folks here, how have they experienced that? And so I think part of it is, how do we know how our language? Well, in part, we do that by seeking to better understanding, a fuller understanding, a more complex understanding beyond the good guy, bad guy that we tend to, that's easy. And so we often resort to it. Is any world conflict, there's good guys and bad guys. Well, it's almost never that simple. And I think part of that is to help us to see that's not that simple, and to try to at least understand where people come from. Begin to understand where people come from, I think will help us in our context here.
years.
Yeah.
I mean, these people aren't just recent countries. Some are.
Yeah.
But they've been here for years, so they've acclimated and they're American.
Yeah, although our country hasn't done really great with diversity either over its history, so yeah. So, but yeah, you're right. This is a multifaceted, layered thing that whenever you pull back a layer, you realize there are more layers, and it's almost impossible for us to get this to the center of the onion from our context. But hopefully, we can at least see a little better of a cross section. Any other responses, thoughts, things that this film stirred within you? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. It's delightful to have you all here, and as we seek to try to understand together and grow in our compassion with one another. So the film next week will be a little bit longer. It's almost 2 hours. It talks more about the current reality, talks about some of the history of the partition, but I think it'll kind of help share, give voice to an experience that we often don't hear. And so please come back next week, same place, same time.
This is, as we said at the beginning, this is just the beginning. This is also overdue. We really should have been doing this sooner, but this was the fire that got lit, at least under us. Thank you to Garrett and Lynnwood for hosting us, and I would like to offer us a prayer as we go forth. Gracious and loving God, our faith is seeking understanding. Our souls yearn for knowledge. Help us to engage in conversation and questions that help to unfold, help to understand, that help to illuminate places of complexity, places where there is hurt. God, I thank you for the filmmakers who have helped us tonight. I thank you for the people who have gathered here, who have been vulnerable with their not knowing, and who are continuing to struggle to seek that knowledge. God, give us all traveling mercies as we go home, and into the rest of this evening, give us good sleep, that we would wake up tomorrow refreshed and ready for a new day at work and at play in your kingdom. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.